Now to a shocking case out of West Virginia where a couple is facing charges after some of their adopted children were found locked in a shed living in deplorable conditions. Jean Whitefeather and Donald Lance are accused of adopting 5 kids from a shelter, targeting them for forced labor specifically because of their race. The sheriff's office says they found some of the children in October locked inside a barn during a welfare check at the couple's home. The 2 children told authorities they had been inside the small room for about 12 hours when they were found. Neighbors reported that the children were also forced to perform farm labor and were not allowed inside the home. Chief Legal Analyst Khalif Rhodes joins us now. Khalif, this is just a horrible case of neglect. Just wretched what these children went through. But let's talk about the charges that this couple faces.
I mean, you're talking about kidnapping. You're talking about, well, let's go back. Disgusting. I think that's the first thing that comes to my mind. When I first looked at this story, it was like, am I really reading this? Is this a parody? Like, what is actually happening? But yeah, the trafficking of human trafficking is the #1 thing. Child abuse, neglect. It runs the gamut of anything, the worst of the worst that you can think about. This didn't just start in West Virginia. It actually started in Washington. They were under investigation in Washington and moved to West Virginia. Sold both of those properties. The attempt to try to pay their bond. They had a $400,000 combined bond. The judge was like, nope, too much. We'll figure something out. We'll make it $500,000 for each of you all. And they kept that money. And they said, because this property was used in the commission of this crime, we believe now it's turned into contraband. And so you can't even get your money back. We'll hold that money until this case is resolved. And if this money goes anywhere, it should go to those children. I mean, this is just absolutely disgusting for sure.
So, I mean, do they face any charges of slavery? Because we mentioned that they supposedly adopted these kids for that purpose.
That would be the neglect. That would be the child abuse. That would be the human trafficking.
You're not going to see that spelled out.
You wouldn't, but what you would see is if it was based on race, you could now open the door for the hate crime charges. That's where you'll see that. And if West Virginia is one of the states that doesn't have it, which is only a handful that don't, what you will see is the federal government will step in. So when you connect the race that was the #1 factor for motivating you to do this charge, that's when the hate crime will come in, and then this charge will be elevated for sure. So that's why the race was involved specifically, and obviously the investigators know more than we know because they're saying they individually target these kids based on their race. And so it had to be text messages, phone calls, something that they know more than just they'd had this adopted group of 5 kids.
You would think that with all the checks and balances in the adoption agency's process that something would have come up, but just the couple, you said that they were under investigation in another state, Washington, I believe.
Correct.
And then, moved to a completely different state, probably to avoid those charges. Does that all play into the severity of their charges? Is that difficult to prove intent there?
Taking folks across state lines, also another charge. That's where you'll have that human trafficking component when you take someone from one location to another location against their will. That's where you'll have that. But what I can say is you get these kind of weird cases. As a criminal defense attorney, I get cases all the time, and I'm like baffled and I'm dumbfounded, right? Yeah. This is one where you're not just scratching your head. You're like, well, how do I defend this? So I listened to one of the arguments that the defense attorney made, and he said, well, there was a key in the barn. They could have got out. It was a misunderstanding. I'm like, if you look at the police report, it said the kids had sores on their feet, looked like they hadn't bathed in a few days, hadn't been fed. I mean, I won't say it's not defensible, but it has to be a serious defense and a reckoning to try to figure out how you can defend this situation and ensure that they don't go to jail, because based on what I see right now, they're going to prison for a long time.
Well, and when you talk about the key that was in the barn, supposedly, I mean, that doesn't play into the mentality of these children and what they've been through and what they've been trained to think because of the situation they were in. Just absolutely horrible. And hopefully the kids will someday be able to get beyond this and get
for sure.
Thank you.